In the spring of 1645, several witches were seized at Manningtree in England and were subsequently condemned and hanged. One of these was an old woman named Elizabeth Clarke, and the most important witness against her was Matthew Hopkins, of Manningtree Gent. It appears that Hopkins had watched with her several nights in a room in the house of a Mr. Edwards in which she was confined, to keep her from sleeping until she made a confession, and to see if she was visited by her familiars. He declared, among other things, that on the night of the 24th of March, which appears to have been the third night of watching, after he had refused to let her call one of her imps or familiars, she confessed that 6 or 7 years before, she had surrendered herself to the devil, who came to her in the form of a proper gentleman with a laced band. Soon after this, a little dog appeared, fat and short in the legs, in colour white, with sandy spots, which, when he hindered it from approaching her, vanished from his sight. She confessed that it was one of her imps named Janiara. Immediately after this had disappeared, another came in the form of a greyhound, which she called Vinegar Tom, and it was followed by another in the form of a polecat. And this informant further saith that going from the house of the said Mr. Edwards to his own house about 9 or 10 o'clock of the night with his greyhound. With him, he saw the greyhound suddenly give a jump and run as if she had been in full course after a hare, and that when the informant made haste to see what his greyhound so eagerly pursued, he espied a white thing about the size of a kitten, and the greyhound standing aloof from it, and that, by and by, the said white imp or kitten danced about the said greyhound, and by all likelihood bit a piece of the flesh of her shoulder, for the greyhound came shrieking and crying to this informant with a piece of the flesh torn from her shoulder. And this informant further saith that coming into his own yard that night, he espied a black thing proportioned like a cat, only it was thrice as big, sitting on a strawberry bed and fixing its eyes on this informant. And when he went toward it, it leaped over the pale toward this informant, as he thought, but ran quite through the yard with his greyhound after it to a great gate, which was underset with a pair of turnbull strings, and did throw the said gate wide open, and then vanished, and the said greyhound returned again to this informant, shaking and trembling exceedingly. Hopkins had not ventured to remain alone with the witch, but had with him John Stern, who also added "gentleman" to his name, and who confirmed all that Hopkins had said, deposed to the coming of imps, and added that the third imp was called Sack and Sugar. They watched at night with another woman, named Rebecca West, and saw her imps in the same manner. She stated that the first time she saw Satan, he came to her at night, and told her he must be her husband, and married her. The severe treatment to which the accused were exposed forced confessions from them all, and they avowed being guilty of every species of mischief, from the taking away of human life to the spoiling of milk. The names and forms of their imps were equally fantastic. Rebecca Jones, a witch from St. Osyth's, said that she had met a man in a ragged suit with great eyes that terrified her exceedingly, and that he gave her 3 things, like moles but without tails, which she fed with milk. Another had an imp in the form of a white dog, which she called Ilimanza, and which she fed on milk pottage. One had 3 imps, which she called Prick Ear, Jack, and Frog. Several witnesses, poor and ignorant people, were brought to testify to the mischief which had been done by these means. A countryman gravely related how, passing at day by the house of one of the women named Anne West, he was surprised to find her door open at that early hour, and looking in, he saw 3 or 4 things like black rabbits, one of which ran after him. He seized upon it and tried to kill it, but it seemed in his hands like a piece of wool, and stretched out in length as he pulled it without any apparent injury. Then, recollecting that there was a spring near at hand, he hurried thither and attempted to drown it, but it vanished from his sight as soon as he put it in the water. He then returned toward the house, and seeing Anne West standing outside the door in her smock, he asked why she sent her imps to torment him. This seems to have been the first appearance of Matthew Hopkins as a witch-finder, for which he afterwards became notorious and which he now assumed as a legal profession. He proceeded in a regular circuit through Suffolk, Norfolk, Cambridgeshire, and Huntingdon, accompanied by John Sterne and a woman whose business it was to examine the bodies of the females in search of their marks. In August 1645, we find them at Bury in Suffolk, where on the 27th of that month no less than 18 witches were executed at once, and 120 more were to have been tried, but a sudden movement of the King's troops in that direction obliged the judges to adjourn the session. Some of the imps here appeared in the shape of snakes, wasps, and hornets, and even of snails. They were mostly employed in petty offences. One man and his wife were guilty only of having bewitched the beer in a brewhouse and making it stink. Others, however, confessed to have caused mischief of a more serious character. The most remarkable victim of this inquisition was an aged clergyman named Lowes, who had been vicar of Brandeston near Framlingham, in that county 50 years, a well-known opponent of the new church government. This man, we are told by Sterne, one of the inquisitors, had been indicted for a common imbanatata, and for witchcraft above 30 years before, and the grand jury found the bill for a common imbanata, who now, after he was found with the marks, confessed that in pride of heart to be equal with, or rather above God, the devil took advantage of him, and he covenanted with the devil and sealed it with his blood, and had those familiars or spirits which sucked on the marks found on his body, and did much harm both by sea and land, especially by sea. For he confessed, he being at Lungerfort in Suffolk, where he preached, as he walked upon the wall there, he saw a great sail of ships pass by, and that, as they were sailing by, one of the 3 imps, namely his yellow one, forthwith appeared to him, and he bade it go and sink such a ship. One that belonged to Ipswich, so he confessed that the imp went forthwith away, and he stood still and viewed the ships, and perceived that the ship to be immediately in more trouble and danger than the rest, for he said the water was more boisterous near that than the rest, tumbling up and down with waves, and soon after it sunk directly down into the sea, when all the rest sailed on in safety. Then he confessed he made 14 widows in 1/4 of an hour. When asked if it did not grieve him to see so many men cast away in a short time, he swore by his Maker, no, he was joyful to see what power his imps had. He was hanged in 1645 at Bury St. Edmunds.